back like we never left. It's Double Move Sports. As always, I'm Stef Albiero. I'm here with the fantasy phenom, Alex Lott, and we're over the moon right now because this is the last day. We're recording on September 8th. Kickoff is officially tomorrow. We got Bucks Cowboys in prime time on Thursday Night Football, and we got some topics we want to hit on, these buzzer beater topics. Alex, I'm pumped for this season.
Dude, I mean, by the time, whoever you are watching right now, by the time you're listening to this, there's a good chance we have already had some football. So we made it. The long off season, the long football drought is over. We actually get more games this season as well. The regular season is going to be longer. It's going to be a great fantasy football season. So props to us for getting here. I mean, we do have some topics to get into today. We're all super hyped for not only the game Thursday between the Cowboys and Bucks. Again, by the time you're listening, who knows what happened in that game? That was a crazy play in the fourth quarter, wasn't it?
I'm so glad my Dak CD Lamb stack worked out.
Good thing Michael Gallup went off in that game, right? But anyway, for Sunday, we got the full slate. Every single team is going to be in action. So, I mean, we're there, man. We're there.
What more do you want? Early start, late night, as much football as you can possibly consume. And we're going to be kicking it all year long in our Discord channel. You can join the party with us. Hit that link down below. It's free. Me and Alex are in there doing live streams, Q&A. If you want to hit us up directly for lineup feedback, roster feedback, start sits. And speaking of start sits, Alex has been cranking this week on a new format that we're so excited about. Literally going through every matchup every single week. And we're going to get into who to start and who to sit. We'll go ahead and make it easy for you guys. We're going to be quick, straight to the point. A lot less takes than you're used to from us, especially during this off-season draft season. But even if you kept up with us last year, we get into a lot of the narratives and things that were coming out. We're going to get right into the important stuff, which is who should you be putting into your lineup. And we'll probably be messing around with a little bit of DFS. We'll be talking about Dynasty. We'll be talking about buy lows. We'll be talking about everything.
Oh, yeah.
But one of the players that we actually did not hit on, and I was like, we have to do it because I'm such a truther on this player for their long-term and short-term outlook. Excited to plug him into lineups, honestly, right away in week one. And a lot of people are kind of confused on what to do with this player, and it's Brandon Eyuk. He was going in the 5th round by the end of the draft season. Earlier, he was going in the 7th. So we saw that ADP continually rise as we got closer to kickoff. Could have been some of the Trey Lance hype. It could have been people just doing more research into what Eyuk actually did from a production standpoint last year. But where he was going, in the early 5th round, as of the most recent ADPs, that's a low-end wide receiver 2 range. That makes him a perfect flex option, a fine wide receiver 2 for this week. And he plays Detroit, who gave up the 2nd most passing yards last year.
Yeah, I'll be honest with you. I don't have a lot of Brandon Eyuk in my leagues in best ball. And it's not necessarily because I don't like Eyuk as a player. I think there's a really good path, really good potential for him to have a breakout season and really elevate his game. But I think the reason I don't have a lot of Brandon Eyuk is just because of where he's going in that early 5th round. I've found myself really, rather having the T. Higgins type of guys in that range, maybe even like a Miles Sanders or a Josh Jacobs as an RB3 in that range. So it's not that I don't like Brandon Eyuk as a player. I've just gone with other guys in that range. You might like some of those guys. You might not, but I'm just more familiar with them, and I think I can better project what's going to happen in their offenses because with San Francisco, to me, with these receivers, with Eyuk and even Deebo Samuel, there is a very wide range of outcomes for these guys. There's so many variables that are question marks, and I think most are going to work out. I think the San Francisco offense is going to be fantastic this season, especially in this first week against Detroit. But you think about this team, first of all, on the defensive side of the ball, they suffered a lot of injuries last season. They had injuries on the offensive side of the ball as well. So you're getting so many new guys in there. So this is almost like a refresh of this team, and we haven't seen them fully healthy since 2019. And a lot of these players are new and different. Like Brandon Eyuk wasn't even in the league at that point. So first you have all the injuries, all the guys coming back. Second, you have the Trey Lance versus Jimmy Garoppolo thing happening at the quarterback spot. Obviously, I think Trey Lance is going to be phenomenal in fantasy football once he takes over the job. Great for this team, great for the running game. But we don't know what it means for the wide receivers and Brandon Eyuk. And last but not least, you have this wide receiver core, Deebo Samuel, Brandon Ayuk, throw George Kittle in there as well, that hasn't really had a big sample size of games where they've all played together. I know Deebo had some good weeks last season. George Kittle's a locked and loaded top 3 tight end. Brandon Ayuk had a really, really strong stretch as a rookie, a freak athlete. But for me, in a run-first offense with a really good defense, I'm just thinking to myself, can Jimmy G or Trey Lance support Brandon Ayuk, Deebo Samuel, and George Kittle to have consistent fantasy value? I just don't know. And because of all those variables, that's why I've found myself passing on Ayuk for some other guys in that range.
Now, some of the names you mentioned were definitely getting taken over Brandon Ayuk. Ayuk was really one of the last Alpha X wide receivers that's playing on the outside consistently. After him, you're looking at names like Kenny Galladay, Cortland Sutton.
Fair.
He's getting taken over, as he should. Names like Robbie Anderson, Chase Claypool, Odell Beckham, Adam Thielen. And I think that's a perfect ADP for him.
Mm-hmm.
I would take him because he's explosive and because the offense could be super explosive with Trey Lance. I'm willing to take Ayuk over a guy like DJ Moore. I'm taking him over Adam Thielen. I'm taking him over Cortland Sutton, some of the other names that we mentioned. But what I'm betting on with Ayuk and why I'm in on him not only week 1, but the entirety of this season and love that ADP, whereas you are fading it a little bit, is because I see the talent that's there from what he did his rookie season. He already relegated Deebo Samuel to the 3rd option in the passing game. And we'll see if Kittle remains the one. I think he will be. But when you look at Brandon Ayuk, this is a guy that San Francisco drafted in the 1st round last year. He's 6 foot, 205, runs a 4.5 flat in the 40-yard dash. I mean, he is an incredible athlete. Last year had 96 targets while he was getting ramped up as a rookie. Extremely impressive. Had 5 touchdowns in that target volume. Now, maybe he'll regress a little bit in the touchdown category, especially with everybody healthy, with new running backs coming in with Trey Sermon, Elijah Mitchell, Raheem Mostert's healthy now. They have some of the guys from last year like Jeff Wilson and Jermichael Hasty as well. But with Brandon Ayuk, we saw what he could do with the ball in his hands, and that's why I believe he jumped over Deebo Samuel as the outside X receiver. And I think this team in the 49ers have a lot of reservations about Deebo Samuel, about his health, and they already went out and gave Brandon Ayuk the higher draft capital than Deebo Samuel.
Yeah, I mean, speaking of health, Brandon Ayuk, I do have to say, at the time of this recording, is questionable for week 1 with a hamstring issue. Right now, he's expected to be out there. He's been kind of dealing with this for a little while now, but just keep an eye on it. Obviously, if the hamstring is bothering him early in the season, you're not putting him in your lineup, and Deebo and Kittle will get more opportunities. But you're right. I mean, Deebo Samuel, he has that historical average depth of target that's like behind the line of scrimmage, which is just absolutely ridiculous. This is a gadget player. They're using him on these jet sweeps, on these end arounds, on these screens. Yes, he can get downfield a little bit, but he's not this traditional X wide receiver like Brandon Ayuk has the capability to be. So from that perspective, I think Ayuk does have the chance to elevate in a way that Deebo doesn't. It's not to say Deebo's not going to have his weeks and have his big plays when he is healthy. But with these two guys and with Kittle, honestly, and the whole San Francisco team, let's be honest, they've gotten so just beaten down by injuries. Hopefully we can see them stay healthy this year to see what a 100% Shanahan offense with this incredible run scheme with hopefully Trey Lance at quarterback sooner rather than later and some weapons can do on offense, because if they can stay healthy, the San Francisco team is going to compete in a really tough NFC West. So I'm with you. Like, I'd take Ayuk over Deebo. I think he did relegate him to more of a Swiss Army knife type of role, but Deebo still is going to have his games. And I think there's going to be weeks where you're a little bit frustrated because Deebo got the targets and Ayuk didn't.
Yeah. You're absolutely spot on. The good thing for Ayuk is he doesn't need that 8 target a game type of volume to be productive with what he can do after the catch. We're so excited for Trey Lance. Everyone has talked at length about his explosiveness on the ground, but also through the air. And that's one of the things that everyone loves about Trey Lance is this touch on the deep ball that he has combined with his rushing. If they're going to throw the ball deep, the ball is going to Brandon Ayuk. Not many defenders can keep up with him, and he plays the role where the ball is going to go when they take those shots. So in the cases for Ayuk, he may have games where it's 3 receptions for 80 yards and a touchdown. And that's the type of, I think, solid output you can expect. It's probably his average. He will definitely have games far below that, and he'll definitely have games where he pops and goes absolutely bananas. But he's going to be one to keep an eye on, a weekly guy that you should probably be considering in your flex. And then if one of the other option goes down, if Kittle goes down, it's going to be wheels up. If Deebo Samuel goes down, it's going to be wheels up. And a player that I want to comp Brandon Eyuk to, just how you should think of them from a fantasy value perspective, to me, it's Chase Claypool.
Okay.
As a guy who's really explosive, he's an athletic freak. He plays the downfield role. He's going to be a guy who can score a lot of touchdowns and make yards after the catch. But he's in an offense that has a lot of other players that are going to get their share and are probably going to feed some running backs as well. Now, there's a lot of differences between the offenses that they're in, but if you like Chase Claypool, I think you should love Brandon Eyuk, because I think Eyuk is in a much clearer situation, even though he has some of the same obstacles. But Alex, let's get into one of the headlines of this week, one of the few breaking news items that came out, if you want to even call it that. And we'll get to Tony Jones as well. But Le'Veon Bell, now on the Ravens practice squad, expected to be signed to their main roster. So Le'Veon Bell, I know right when it happened, I texted you. I was like, dude, I'm not worried for Gus Edwards at all.
Yeah.
Because I have a lot of Gus Edwards shares. And you agreed with me on that sentiment. Le'Veon Bell really didn't do much to impress last year in really what should have been a smash situation for him, coming in with a banged up CEH on one of the best offenses of football, and still really wasn't able to put it together.
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, looking at the text just now, you said right when he got signed, quote, "Not worried for Gus at all. Lev is washed." And honestly, I've seen some sentiment that's like, oh, rush out to the waiver wire to pick up Le'Veon Bell. Oh, get ahead of your opponents. And if you saw this coming, you would have picked him up 2 days ago. It's like, no, you wouldn't, because Le'Veon Bell has not had elite fantasy production since Pittsburgh, since like 2017.
2017.
He missed a year because he sat out. Then he went to the Jets. And I think from a fantasy perspective, he ended up being fine that season. He was like a high-end RB2, but it was because he saw a ridiculous amount of inefficient volume with the Jets. Last season, got a golden opportunity after being cut, went to the Kansas City Chiefs, had a chance to play, and he was getting passed up by Darrell Williams. So I don't think Le'Veon has any juice left in the tank to add fantasy value. I think the Ravens had to sign a veteran as a depth piece. Maybe he's used as like a Justice Hill plus type of role where some of the third downs, I think this is best case scenario, like some of the third downs you see Le'Veon Bell come in, he might get a catch or two per game and might get 5-6 carries a game, but I'm not like over the moon about his talent at this point to where I think he can turn 6 carries and 2 catches into fantasy production. So maybe for the Ravens, we see him on the field. Maybe he does cut into some of that workload we thought Tyson Williams might get, but you and I never, and most people never thought Gus Edwards was going to turn into this every down workhorse, receiving back, doing it all for the Ravens. That's just not how they operate. He was going to be a clear 1 rather than being in a 1A, 1B situation. So for Gus Edwards, this doesn't really concern me at all. He was never going to get 100% of the work in Baltimore, and I don't think Lev Bell carries a lot of fantasy value either. He's going to be on the field. You're going to see him from time to time in the best case scenario for Le'Veon, but he's not someone I'm interested in. And I would much rather have Tony Jones for the Saints, who we're going to get into a little bit later.
And the final nail in the coffin for Le'Veon Bell is the fact that the Ravens added Trenton Cannon to their 53-man roster instead of Le'Veon Bell, opting to send him straight to the practice squad. There's no guarantee that he is actually going to be called up. And whatever value you had from Tyson Williams, go ahead and throw that out the window. I think he's essentially nothing at this point. The team's shown that they're going to fill it.
Yeah, I think it affects Tyson Williams more than anyone, for sure.
Wait. Alex, I have to stop the show because I'm dumb hyped over this new sponsorship deal we got. Shout out to our guys over at Manscaped. And look, I was skeptical, but Alex, you know I've been a very hairy guy for a long time. I was the kid at 13 years old in middle school.
Oh, yeah.
With chest hair showing out of the polo shirt. Like, I was that dude.
I was jealous at the time.
Well, nothing to be jealous over anymore because ever since I got this lawnmower 4.0 from them, it's been clean down there to say the least.
Manscaped has the lawnmower 4.0, not the 1, not the 2, not the 3, but the 4.0. Talk about sleepers on our show, and this has to be one of the best sleeper products out there. I was skeptical as well, and it's been an absolute game changer. Check out Manscaped. This thing is legit, and you will definitely not be disappointed by this full body trimmer. It's incredible.
So Manscaped was nice enough to give us a 20% off discount code for the Double Move Sports viewers. You can get 20% off and free shipping with code DMS at manscaped.com. That's 20% off with free shipping at manscaped.com. Use code DMS, unlock your confidence, and always use the right tools for the job with Manscaped. Now back to the show. So Alex, Tony Jones now has become a name in the fantasy sphere after Latavius Murray at 30 years old was dropped by the New Orleans Saints. We'll see where Latavius ends up, if anywhere. But Tony Jones was a guy that I didn't realize was actually on the New Orleans roster last year, played in one game, had 3 carries. And when you look at what Tony Jones' resume is up to this point, he was a 4-year player, undrafted at a Notre Dame, had some decent efficiency throughout his college career, didn't really get any playing time as a freshman, but continued to ascend every single year that he played. You know, in his senior season, really developing in the passing game, 15 receptions for 104 yards, 5.5% target share. And while that's not video game numbers like we're talking about with guys like Kenny Gainwell or guys like Chuba Hubbard, you know, these drafted prospects. And if we look at guys that are a lot better than that, like Javonte Williams, who had ridiculous efficiency, or looking at Najee Harris, was an absolute stud in college. The thing that really holds me back from getting overly excited about Tony Jones is just the fact that he was, one, undrafted. We know draft capital is the number one correlation for running backs and fantasy production, but also the fact that when you look at him athletically, when you look at his combine numbers coming into that 2020 draft, it's not anything really to get excited about. He has the size at 5'11", 220. You love to see that there. He's definitely going to be a bowling ball when he's out there, probably going to be falling forward more often than not just with that size, but runs a 4.68. It's in the 24th percentile. And he didn't jump out of the gym. He didn't do anything crazy. And the fact that he took all 4 years, was undrafted, I'm just not getting overly excited. But when you look at a guy who's essentially the number 2 to Alvin Kamara, there could be a role there for him, especially if this New Orleans offense finds a new level of explosiveness without Drew Brees and his limited depth of target holding them back.
I think we got to be real here. The only way Tony Jones gets fantasy relevance is if Alvin Kamara gets hurt or misses any time. And I think this is a true handcuff type of situation because honestly, yes, he's going to be involved. He might get a carry here or there. He's going to get in the game. Kamara's not going to be an every down workhorse. He never has been, and that's going to continue moving forward. But think about what Latavius Murray has been for fantasy over the past couple seasons and almost like take that down just like 10%. I think that's what you're getting in Tony Jones because the truth is Tony Jones beat out Latavius Murray to be on this roster. I know it was like a pay issue, but they wouldn't have been willing to cut Latavius if Tony Jones had not outperformed him. But I think that says more about what Latavius Murray is right now, not what he's been the last couple of years. So if we're comparing Tony Jones to the Latavius Murray of 2020, of 2019, he's not as good of a player. You mentioned the draft capital, and to be honest with you, like we see from time to time these undrafted free agent running back gems come into the league. Phillip Lindsay did it, James Robinson in recent memory last year. But if we're just being brutally honest, if you compare even Tony Jones to undrafted free agent James Robinson, it makes James Robinson look like All-American in the SEC because his college production profile is far better, even though the competition isn't there. His athletic profile is better. Like you can see how James Robinson ended up having some success. Tony Jones, from a profile perspective, not a ton to be really excited about. But I will say, watching him in the preseason, like he did show some burst. He did show some spark for this offense. So I think he enters that kind of Alexander Madison range of handcuff to where he probably needs to be on rosters. But he's not someone that I'm getting overly excited about unless Kamara misses time. So he's not a Tony Pollard level handcuff. He's not quite to that point yet because he doesn't quite have the skill set. But I think if he was to get the starting job, he would provide some fantasy value. So either add him to the end of your bench if you have a deep bench or you're in a deeper league, or definitely keep an eye on him on your waiver wire. But it's interesting. And to talk about Latavius Murray real quick, I think he will get picked up somewhere. I think Tony Jones essentially allowed New Orleans to have the flexibility to cut him from the roster. But I do think Latavius is going to end up somewhere. And I don't necessarily think he alone is going to provide tremendous fantasy value unless he ends up in like a perfect situation. Like if he was to go to Baltimore, if he was to go to Atlanta, maybe he carves out a role, but those teams just signed Le'Veon Bell and Wayne Gallman respectively. So like, I don't know if that's going to happen. I think more than anything, we could see him go somewhere and make us damper our expectations for somebody. Like imagine if he ended up in a Miami, in a Jacksonville, something like that. I don't want to jinx it, knock on wood that doesn't happen. But Latavius, to me, I'm fine adding him to the end of the bench as well, just to see what happens. But I'm not expecting big things from him this season either.
So let's stick with this undrafted player on the Saints profile that we're talking about. And let's talk about Marquez Callaway. Guy who's been probably in every single fantasy magazine that you'll see on the rack in the grocery store talking about sleepers for this year. And what's funny is that this is another undrafted player out of Tennessee, probably good friends with Alvin Kamara from their time together at UT. But at 6'1", 205, I like the profile for Marquez Callaway. And that's one of the things when we're looking at undrafted players specifically, measurables matter across the board. But for these undrafted guys, it's like, look, the team is not set on giving them any sort of production, so they're going to have to prove themselves in a big way. That's where a lot of the hesitation lies with guys like James Robinson. And when you see a team like Jacksonville go out and take Travis Etienne in the first round when they have James Robinson, that just shows you the lack of loyalty that these organizations are going to have to these undrafted players, just the nature of the game. But when you look at Callaway, he's in a smash situation. He balled out in the preseason, and he has some speed. He runs a 4.55, has exceptional burst, and actually has a pretty impressive college resume. Had a 33% college dominator, meaning that he was responsible for 33% of his offense's receiving yards and receiving touchdowns. A ridiculous college yards per reception of 19 yards per reception. Very, very efficient with his touches in college coming out of Tennessee. I mean, that's the level of Jalen Waddle had at 19 yards per reception. So if you love Jalen Waddle, what he's doing, Marquez Callaway could be seen as like a Jalen Waddle light, who's just not anywhere near as fast. But when you look at who's going to play the X outside role in a Jameis Winston-led New Orleans Saints offense, you got to get excited for that player. And even if it's just situationally until Michael Thomas comes back, I like Marquez Callaway a lot this year. And he is a guy that should have been taken in the deep rounds of 2021 redraft leagues. But we have to temper expectations a little bit because Callaway has a tough matchup in week one. I think this is the time, and hopefully you're not relying on starting Marquez Callaway in week one. Hopefully he's your wide receiver 4, wide receiver 3. You don't need to put him into your flex this week. But if you're thinking about it, I would hedge a little bit because he plays the Green Bay Packers, who have the exceptionally talented and proven Jair Alexander, one of the best cornerbacks in the league. It's not going to be a pretty matchup for Callaway. Jair Alexander was number 1 in pass breakups last year, was 3rd in yards per target allowed, 7th in yards per reception allowed. So not only is he not getting burned, not only is he staying in strong coverage and breaking up passes, he's also stopping guys once they get the ball in their hands. So I'm not expecting huge things from Marquez Callaway. I think if you do play him, you're hoping for a deep touchdown at some point. But not a guy I'm starting right away, but certainly on better matchups. Love Callaway as a sleeper this season.
I agree with you. And speaking to week one, no, you probably shouldn't play him. You probably drafted him, to your point, at a spot where you don't have to start him in week one. But I wouldn't be surprised just because of the funneled pass volume that's going to have to go to Callaway, that's going to have to go to Alvin Kamara. I wouldn't be surprised to see him have a serviceable week out of your flex, but I'm definitely trying to avoid if possible. And honestly, he's a guy to keep your eye on, because if he does come out, has a bad game week one because of the tough matchup, someone could drop him in one of these home leagues. So if he ends up on waivers after week one, by all means pick him up, because I'm impressed by Callaway. I'm in. I mean, I liked this guy before because we did see flashes from him last season. I mean, last year with Michael Thomas's absence, we saw a game against Carolina. He had 10 targets, and on those 10 targets, 8 receptions for 75 yards. Later on in the season, he had a 3-reception, 51-yard game on 74% snaps. So it wasn't like consistent week in and week out production, but we saw flashes from Callaway in 2020. And now coming into 2021, people were already kind of excited to see if he could emerge as the 2 on this team. And now with the Michael Thomas injury, we know we're getting some value out of Callaway for those first 6 weeks of the season at a minimum. And the thing I love about Callaway is because when you really project fantasy, you and I talk about this all the time. It's talent plus opportunity equals fantasy production. Then when we start playing the weekly game, matchup also comes into play. But with Marquez Callaway, we knew with the Michael Thomas injury, he was going to step into some opportunity. But to be honest with you, for a while, it looked like it was going to be Tre'Quan Smith. We've seen Tre'Quan Smith have opportunity in the past, but because the talent in the league hasn't quite matched up, you haven't gotten fantasy production. Now with Callaway, we were still wondering, does he have the talent? Is he going to have the talent to produce in fantasy football on a consistent basis? And not only did we get camp report after report after report of Callaway absolutely tearing it up as the clear number one wide receiver on this team, but we got the icing on the cake when Jameis came out and threw 2 touchdowns to Callaway in the first half of that preseason game. 2 incredible, acrobatic, like Sports Center top 10 catches against the ones on defense as well. So like the first one, diving, it was PI. He still came up with the ball. The second one was on the first cornerback for Jacksonville. Their cornerback one, Shaquille Griffin, who they just signed this offseason for a big deal, brought in the one-handed catch at the pylon. So, like, to me, those 2 plays, plus some of just, like, getting separation off the line of scrimmage on some of these slant routes, some of this underneath stuff, like, he looked phenomenal. I know that's a one-game preseason sample size, but just pairing that with the flashes we saw last year, with the reports out of camp, there's no reason to believe that this guy can't be a good, if not great, NFL wide receiver. So I'm excited to see if he can take hold of this opportunity and run with it and be a fantasy producer all season long, even when Michael Thomas comes back.
Could be a strong number 2, especially with Adam Troutman coming in banged up. Going to be missing the first 3 weeks of the season at least.
Also, Shaquille Griffin is his brother, who's a linebacker. So Shaquille Griffin is the corner for Jacksonville, who he torched on that football in the preseason.
Definitely going to be plugging Callaway into lineups in week 2 against the Panthers. Might temper expectations again in week 3 against the Patriots, but then after that, Giants, Washington football team, Seattle Seahawks. He has the Falcons twice this year. We'll see when Michael Thomas comes back, but for now, he can be a guy who can be a desperation flex, a desperation wide receiver too in some of those weeks with those good matchups. And we'll get into all the start sits. We'll tell you when to plug him in if you follow us every single week here at Double Move Sports. If you guys want to support the show, a like and a sub, always appreciated. Again, join the conversation with us in that Discord link down below. It is popping off in there, over 165 strong active members in the community. Again, we'll be doing live streams and Q&A all throughout the season. Appreciate y'all listening and watching, and we'll see you next time. Peace.